So the lighting is a little off today, and I apologize for that, but I overindulged last night, so I'm still dealing with a headache that's mostly gone, so yeah, no bright lights facing my direction for me today. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today I would like to share with you all the books that I read or did not read or got, partially through in March. So I think how I'm gonna split this video up is between books that I didn't get all the way through yet, books that I read for middle grade March, books that I read that were on my monthly TBR, books that I read that were not on my monthly TBR, and then what I DNF'd. So first up, things that I was reading or got partially through in March. I continued my reread of The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett, and I didn't get that much farther in it this month, just basically a couple of chapters. I'm taking my time really with this book because it's one of my all-time favorites, and I'm just going very slowly through and annotating everything. Next, for things on my TBR, I did not pick up Ella Enchanted at all this month, but I do want to give this a reread at some point, so it will probably show up on my reading list for like the month again in the future. It just might not be until like the summertime. I also did not get very far in Understood Betsy. I'm on chapter 3. It's not that I didn't want to read it, it's just that I lost the mood to read it right now. So, I don't think this is going to be something that I pick up in April, but I do think that I will come back to this most likely in May. Something else that I did not quite finish up this month, I'm actually filming this on the last day of March. I did not actually manage to finish reading Inkspell. I do definitely still plan on reading Ink Death next month. I just basically have to finish the last chunk, and considering my headache, and also considering just other stuff that I want to do today, I just don't think that I'm going to be able to finish this chunk tonight. So I'm just gonna call it and say this puppy is probably not gonna be on my finished read list until April. So okay, so that was those. Now let's get into the books that I actually finished reading. The first of these, so the first couple, were for middle grade March. The first prompt was to read a book that had won an award that was not the Newbery Medal, and for that I chose Joey Pigs That Swallowed the Key by Jack Gantos. This was a National Book Award finalist. So this is a book about Joey, who is a little boy with ADHD, and he knows that he's like a good kid, but he just has all of these authority figures in his life basically giving him the message that no, in fact, he is not, and he is a bother. So I actually talked more about this book in my vlog, not my most recent one that just went up, but the weekend vlog that I posted I don't know, the other week or something. I talked more about it then because that's when I was in the middle of reading this, but This is such a hard book to get through. It is not that thin of a book, and it is incredibly hard to read. Joey in the book is basically being failed by like all of the adults in his life. His dad abandoned the family. His mom ran off to find his dad and didn't come back for years and years until recently. In this novel, he was left to be raised by his grandmother, who, like, she was very abusive to him, and it's just been pretty bad. His mom has recently come back, and she's trying to, like, be there and be a good mom and, like, help and stuff like that, but she has her own issues. She's definitely an alcoholic. It's like she knows how to handle Joey and try to help him, but at the same time she's also severely fucking up. And it's just, so there's that, and then you also have all of his teachers and the school, and it's difficult in that situation as well because they clearly do not have the resources to properly educate him, to properly assist him. It's such a tough read because I ended up feeling sorry for basically everyone in this book except for his grandmother. His grandmother's trash, but like everybody else, like his mom's got a lot on her plate. So I even felt bad for her, and I felt bad for Joey, and I felt bad for the other adults because like it's tough for the like school staff as well because they're basically doing what they can with what they have, which is not much. And this is set in the 1990s, and school in the 90s, especially like school resource stuff, was like buck wild. So I'm not 100% sure because I'm not involved in the school system. I'm not a kid. I don't have kids currently, so I'm not 100% sure, but from the little bits that I do hear from like teachers that I follow on social media, that the resources are better, like programs are better than they were when we were kids, but like there's always room for improvement. This was just very hard to read. It was very, very hard to read. I got very emotional at multiple points in this book, just feeling so bad for this kid that is like he's not a bad kid, he is a good kid, but the message that he is getting from everyone all the time is that he is the worst, and that's just so hard to constantly get this message from others that you are a burden, or you're stupid, or you're just awful. And it's just, that's so, oh, it makes me so sad. So yeah, this is a very hard book to read, but I mean, I think it's also like a very important book to read because it's just like, hey, this shows like everybody is going through something. Everybody is going through something. But yeah, I don't fully remember how I felt about this book as a kid. I know that I read it. I knew that it was very popular. This was on like a list of books that like everybody was reading in my elementary school at the time. And I can't really remember how I felt about it other than a couple of parts bothered me a little bit, but for the most part it was just, but I feel like I got a lot more out of it now as an adult reading it than I did or than I could have as a kid. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. So the next prompt for Mill Grapemarsh was to read a sci-fi or dystopian novel, and I chose Stinker from Space by Pamela F. Service, about an alien who crash lands on Earth, and he basically possesses a skunk. And then he ends up enlisting the help of two kids to help him like find his way home. So this was a childhood favorite of mine. I've mentioned it like a few times. This is one of my favorite books from when I was a kid. I loved it so much, and I really enjoyed this reread. I had such a good time jumping back into this novel. It is so fun and exciting and funny. It is totally improbable. There is this one part in particular that is just so utterly improbable, but I mean, that's what made it so fun as a kid, and I just loved it so much then. I desperately wanted a pet skunk back then. It was such a good reread. I mean, it was published in 1988, so there are some outdated elements to this book, very much so, but none of those outdated elements, I think, it's nothing that was too terribly outdated, just a little bit, and also it's nothing that was done in like a mean manner or anything. I just really loved this a lot. I forgot how funny this book was until I was really getting into it. The humor in here is really delightful, and I just really enjoy all of the characters, especially Stinker, who is the main character, the alien. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this reread so much, and I highly recommend it as like a middle grade sci-fi if you have like a kid who you think might want to get into sci-fi, or if you yourself just want to read more middle grade sci-fi. I would highly recommend it. There's also a sequel, Stinker's Return, and that one's good too. I will say it does not hold a candle to the first book, but that one is also enjoyable. So I gave this 5 stars. So the next prompt was to read a book that had the sky on the cover or in the title, and for that I chose Baseball in April and Other Stories by Gary Soto. This is a collection of stories about Latinx children growing up in California's Central Valley. So I really loved this collection as a kid. Something that I really liked a lot about this collection was the glossary in the back, which, as you can see, is Spanish words, phrases, and expressions used in the book. I grew up in like rural Vermont, and it's not that diverse, and so I didn't really have a lot of exposure to a ton of different languages and cultures. And when I did get a little exposure to the Spanish language, I was like hooked. And so finding a book like this that had like words in it, that had like particular words and phrases noted in it that you could then like, you know, learn and stuff like that, I loved this so much as a kid. And I really appreciate it now too, although I will have to say I was embarrassed about the things that I did not know what it was, because I felt like I should have known better what some of the phrases mean. But yeah, there's just an element of this that I really enjoyed. I really liked taking a look at these kids' lives. This is set at like, I think this work, yeah, it was published in 1990, so you can pretty much get the idea that all of the stories in it were probably set in like the 80s and like 1990. And I just really liked getting this look at this area in California and get a look at all of these kids' lives and their families and friends and culture and everything. That was a lot of fun. I think out of this bunch, I had like 2 favorites. The first story I think was my favorite was probably The Marble Champ. I think I mentioned it in my vlog or my TBR video. It was like one of the only stories from this collection that I really remembered from when I was a kid because it made an impression on me, and is about a little girl who, she's very smart academically, but she is not an athletic person at all, and she decides that, you know what, she wants to learn a sport, and so she ends up learning how to play marbles. And I think my other favorite was the first story in this collection, which is called Broken Chain, and it's about Alfonso, who desperately wants to impress this girl that he has a crush on, and he's also dealing with all of that, like, pre-adolescent, like, insecurity about who you are and how you look and how you fit in and stuff like that. And I just thought that the story itself was very relatable and also really kind of cute. But I just really enjoyed it. I think, again, just like Joey Pig's Eye, I think I understood and got a lot more out of this collection as reading it as an adult than I had as a child. So this just kind of confirms for me that you should try to, every few years or so, reread like books you enjoyed from when you were younger, maybe even books you didn't enjoy. That depends. If it's something you truly hated or like DNF'd, maybe don't, because you might not have a good experience. But if it's something you're just kind of like meh about, maybe revisit that. If it's something you loved, revisit it and see if there's anything more you can glean out of it. Like, going back to these books that I read as a kid, like, I can remember my impressions of them, but I feel like just coming at them from a different point in my life, I'm just getting a lot more out of these stories than I did when I was younger, when I was the same age as some of the characters. So yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this collection overall, and I would also recommend it. I really like the look, especially at like family relationships that were in here as well. So I gave this collection 4 stars. That I read for Middle Grade March, it's actually the last book I read for Middle Grade March, was to read a book that was like recently published. And the one that I chose was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. So this is following Amari as she finds an invitation for the summer trials at the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. And she ends up joining so she can look for answers as to what has happened to her missing brother. This book was so incredibly action-packed. It was a lot of fun. It had a very interesting world that was introduced, some pretty cool magic that was used. I did really love like the magic school vibes. That's a trope that I definitely really enjoy. I got a lot of like Nevermore vibes from this book, and just overall I really liked the whole, the magic school vibes of this whole book. And I really also liked that in here they show people actually studying. Like, that's something that's not always shown in magic school settings, so I really love it when it's like, no, we're not just practicing and getting it, we're researching and studying and reading and doing all kinds of things. Like, I liked that aspect of it too. I'll just say though, holy tropes. This book has so many tropes packed into one volume. Honestly, almost too many tropes for one book to possibly contain. I feel like overall you can get away with overusage of tropes for middle grade novels. At some point I just felt like maybe there were a little too many tropes involved in this book. Yeah. Then again, I am not the target audience for this, so take this with a grain of salt, but I do have to say the overloading of tropes into one book did make me roll my eyes a little bit. It was something that definitely kept this book from being like a 5-star read. It just felt like it was a bit much. I did still really enjoy this though, and the ending of it did make me a little bit emotional, and I did enjoy this enough to the point that I am very excited to read the next book, and I also really want to pick up the third book when that comes out, because I believe that comes out this year. So yeah, it's definitely a series that is worth continuing on with. I'm just it just felt a little bit overloaded at some points for me personally. But I gave this 4 stars. Okay, then books that were on my monthly TBR that I read. First was The Egypt Game by Zilpha Keatley Snyder, and this is basically about kids who really love ancient Egypt, and they end up making this abandoned like storage yard behind this antiquity shop into their own private playground of sorts, where basically they create their own version of ancient Egypt in this like elaborate game. And there's also like underlying creepiness in the neighborhood as well. So I really enjoyed this reread. I really like all of the kids in it. I thought they were very interesting characters. I just enjoyed largely, I think, the nostalgia of this book, because I like really loved this book as a kid. It like set off my own like mini period of being super into like Egypt, and yeah, just the nostalgia itself of this book was pretty high for me, and I also just really love the celebration of imagination and friendships, because that's what this book largely is, basically is like a celebration of imagination itself. These kids gathering together to create this whole like magical world in this elaborate game is just so charming, you know? And I just very much enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed this reread. It is pretty outdated. This was like published in like the 60s, so obviously there are going to be some aspects of it that severely date it. It's, again, there's not like really any ill intent in that. It's just that's how society was at the time, so that's what was written. I did see some a couple of complaints on like Goodreads from people who were upset about the creepy element in the neighborhood, but I kind of enjoyed that. It was like a bonus element to this story that I thought was an interesting thing to add in. And also relevant, really, because sometimes there are darker sides to childhood. So overall I did pretty much enjoy this reread, and I gave this like 4 stars. The next thing I read from my TBR was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is about an orc named Viv who decides to open up a cafe in a market town, where she is basically making friends along the way and trying to put her past to rest. So an interesting side note of this read was that in the back of the book, in the author's note, it mentions that Travis Baldree had a hand in making Fate, which is a computer game that I was super into when I was younger. So that was a bonus, like, fun little thing to find out. I'll try to leave, like, images or something of the game Fate in case you also remember what this is talking about, or maybe you won't remember until you actually get, like, a look at it, but... yeah, it's basically like a dungeon game, like a fighting game or something. I really liked it when I was younger. I had to give up playing it at some point just because my arachnophobia was getting like a lot worse. But yeah, that was just fun. As to the book itself, this is a cozy fantasy, which honestly, I think is now my favorite subgenre of fantasy. Next to middle grade fantasy, I still like really love that a lot. This was so much fun. The story overall was just so sweet. I really liked the characters and the found family element of this, you guys. I just loved it so much. It made my heart so warm. I do have to say too, the descriptions of this were so good. Like, I am a sucker for a renovation story. I've watched like plenty of renovation like shows. There is right now Ariel Bissett. If you watch her channel, she bought a like 100 and some odd year old farmhouse a couple of years ago, and she's been slowly like renovating it, and I've been like very happily and also jealously watching her videos and stuff like that. I blame my interest in this on my dad and my grandpa, who always had this old house on TV quite frequently, so I kind of blame them for my interest in that. But I loved the like building and renovation aspects of this book a lot. Like, I thought that was pretty great. The descriptions were so cool. I also really loved the descriptions of the coffee itself and the food. It was not just like a good story, but it felt like a full experience reading it, and it made me like really hungry. And I read this while I was away with my husband and our friends on our get together, and it definitely had me drinking a lot more coffee over the couple of days that I was reading this than I honestly probably should have, because I just wanted more coffee while I was enjoying this. Just really loved it. The descriptions were so beautiful. I know that not a lot happens in this book. Like, stuff has happened in this book, and there are a couple of like exciting points too, but overall I know not a lot goes on in this book, but I do enjoy like slice of life anime, so maybe that's why I could partially why I could fully get behind like a slice of life, like cozy fantasy novel. It was just so chill and heartwarming and sweet, and there were some funny parts, and I just really loved it. I can't even think of anything like to critique this at all, because I just enjoyed it so much. I can't wait to read the prequel when it comes out. So yeah, I gave this like 5 stars. Last book that was on my TBR for the month that I read was City of Light, City of Dark by Avi and Brian Floca. This is a story about 2 kids who are pulled into like this adventure involving like an ancient pact, a little bit of magic, and this really big secret that's hidden like within Manhattan. So it's a graphic novel. I love this. This was the first graphic novel I ever read. I picked this up for the first time when I was like the 6th grade and adored it. I love the story, but I really love the art of this. There's a couple of like pages that I can't really show because they're definitely spoilers and I don't want to spoil anything. But this is one example of just really cool artwork. Like, I just really love that. That's so freaking cool. I just really like this. I saw some reviews on Goodreads that were like disparaging the simplicity of this, and the thing is that yeah, it's simple, but like the sheer amount of work that went into the pen and ink drawings of this, the shading and everything is definitely so so very much impressive. I told my husband that he should read this and showed him the artwork, and now he is pretty interested in giving this a read because he really enjoyed the look of it. I really, like I said, I love the artwork. I really enjoyed the characters. I think it's an exciting story, and it's really cool, the folklore that Avi created for this story. I really loved that as well. I think the only real critique I have of this book is that I wish there was just a little bit more. I wish there was just a little bit more about the folklore, a little bit more of the details, and more of like an after story with the characters. But then again, I don't know if this is something I'd really want a sequel to, because I think it's pretty well put together as a standalone graphic novel itself. But yeah, I really enjoyed this reread so much, and yeah, it made me very happy to revisit one of my like all-time favorite books again. So this is a 5-star. Then we get into books that were not on my TBR that I read. The first couple of these were these little like comic strip collection books. I ended up picking these up because after a couple of these books I just needed a little bit of brain downtime before bed, and so I ended up like reading these. They are Take a Bow BC, You're Not For Real Snoopy, and Dennis the Menace and His Pal Joey. Take a Bow BC is by Johnny Hart, and this is a collection of the BC comics. It's pretty outdated, but I still found it kind of funny, and there were some references in here, and like people referenced that I honestly didn't quite get it because I didn't know who these people were. But I still enjoyed flipping through this, and I really like the character of Grog. He's like this very hairy character that gets introduced at some point. It's like they're all cavemen, but he's like an extra caveman, I guess. He got he kind of crawled out of an iceberg, and he's just like extra hairy. That's Grog. He's very weird. I kind of like him. Then You're Not For Real Snoopy. This is Peanuts, of course. This is by Charles M. Schulz. This is so outdated, like incredibly so. Some of the things that I know I found funny when I was younger, I just don't really find funny anymore, but I still really enjoyed reading this. And I think it just solidified for me the Lucy Van Pelt hate. I really don't like her very much at all. But it also did confirm for me that Snoopy is the best thing in the comic strip and in this book. So, oh yeah, this was like, I gave this like 4 stars, I gave this 3 stars, and then Dennis the Menace and His Pal Joey. This is the Dennis the Menace comic, of course, by Hank Ketchum. This definitely has some big vibes of Kids Say the Darndest Things. If that was like, if you watched that show in its many iterations, it definitely has the vibe of that, of kids saying and doing the darndest things. Just really dumb stuff that's really funny though. Also kind of outdated, but I didn't mind that so much. I ended up giving this like a 4-star, and it's probably, I probably rated it a little higher just due to the nostalgia of it. These are all comic strips that I regularly read from the you know, Sunday Funnies and like the week newspaper comic strips. I just read them like all the time, and they were ones that I really enjoyed, especially Dennis the Menace, and I probably feel extra nostalgic for it too due to like the movie that came out when I was little. I can't remember when exactly it came out, but it had like, there's a couple of big names in it, like Walter Matthau was in it and Christopher Lloyd was in it, so you know I was gonna watch it. And like I haven't revisited that movie in a very long time. I probably should to see how it is, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'll throw up like a couple of pictures or something so you can see, and maybe it'll jog your memory, or maybe you haven't seen it. Maybe you're too young for it. God, that makes me feel old. But yeah, fun little trip down memory lane, kind of, even though all of these collections came out way before I was born, but still, nostalgia. Another book that I read was Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett. This is part of the Discworld series, and this is a subsection of the Discworld series following witches. The Witches of Discworld. This book is that time, here's my note on it, that time Granny Weatherwax and her coven decided to meddle for the good of a kingdom and things get weird. I think that's the best summation I can make of this book. Things get very weird. I love Granny Weatherwax. There's a little bit of her that kind of almost reminds me of like Professor McGonagall from like the Harry Potter series, but like she's just so no nonsense yet very funny, and like I just really love her. Out of all the witches in here, I think she was my favorite, although Nanny Ogg is absolutely ridiculous. She sounds like such a fun, like, great aunt to have. Like, she'd be just absolutely ridiculous. Magrette's pretty great too. There is a lot of references in here, and I could see what Terry Pratchett was trying to do here with some like references to New Agey stuff that I kind of chuckled at a little bit. This was so funny. I will admit that there were a couple of points in the book where it felt like things were dragging, but it picked up back up again fairly quickly afterwards. So it wasn't too bad. As you can see, in the corners that I bent down, I found a lot of quotable things in here. Yeah, I just really loved it. And I also really loved the statements in here that Terry Pratchett was making on prejudice and rumor, and how rumors start, how easily they are spread, how they change people's perceptions and things like that. I thought he was doing some really interesting work with that here, which is actually relating back to the We Free Men, which is later on in the Discworld series chronologically. So, yeah, overall, I just really enjoyed this, and so far I've read Tiffany Aching, which I think is my favorite subsection of the series, and I've read Rincewind and Death, and now The Witches. And I think next to Tiffany Aching, with The Witches, or I think the actual subsection is called Witches Abroad or something, but it's The Witches. I think they're my favorite, like, characters to follow along with too, because they're just ridiculous. I love them. Another one of the books that I read this month, actually read it at our Airbnb because it was there. It was the first book in the Spiderwick Chronicles, the Field Guide, and that is by Holly Black and Tony DiTerlizzi. And that's basically following the Grace children as they move into their family's crumbling Victorian mansion and find secrets, mysteries, mysterious creatures, and this like really spooky field guide to all things magic and fairy. I really loved that book. I loved the concept of it. The illustrations were fantastic. The mystery and the magic of the whole thing, I just really enjoyed it. It pleased this little inner child still inside of me that really wanted things to be real, really wanted that Hogwarts letter, really wanted there to be borrowers living in my walls of my house, really wanted all of that stuff. So that, like, yeah, that pleased some part of me, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. I had watched the movie when it came out, whenever that was. I'd forgotten that it was actually a book series. So as soon as I saw it on like the bookshelves at our Airbnb, I was like, I'm reading that. That I think that the one thing I didn't like about the first book was that the kid's mom was just so over the top. Like she goes from 0 to 60 in her like rage-o-meter. It was absolutely insane, and I'm kind of wondering if this is like just the parental vibe that they were going for in the series, or if that is going to have something to do with the magical stuff or the house or something, if that's gonna be like an underlying, like something's causing that going on, that we'll find out later in the series. I'm not 100% sure, but it just felt very over the top, to be honest. Like she really needed to chill out. The only other downside to reading that book was that now I need the series. So I guess that is going on to my potential buy list for when I break my book buying ban in the summer. So, yep. Luckily, as far as I know, there aren't too many books in the series, so it won't be like absolutely insane. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I can't wait to read the rest of it. And yeah, I gave that 4 stars. Next book I read was Who Da F Are You by Huda Fame. So this is a graphic novel that is about Huda F. It's not really a memoir, although the author did state that some of the people and the situations are kind of based off of her own like teen years and stuff. It's not a direct memoir, but yeah, it's about Huda F, who is a hijab-wearing Muslim teen who has recently moved to a new place with her family, and she is starting at a new school and trying to like fit in and make friends and figure out who she is, basically. I really loved the art style of this book. I figured I would, just because I also really like the webcomic, Yes, I'm Hot in This. So yeah, but I just really loved it. I also just really loved the faces that Huda F makes. They're so great, so expressive. This was also just so funny in a lot of parts, like laugh out loud funny, and there were also a couple of sections where I was cringing so hard because it just reminded me of those like awkward teenage situations, and just, I also really liked learning about what it is like for a Muslim teen in America, like what that situation in life is. Because I don't think I've really read that many accounts of it up to this point, so I really liked that glimpse into what it's like as a teen in America when you are also Muslim. And I also really liked and like situations that are experienced by Muslim teens, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I found this to be very informative and fun and infuriating at a couple of points, and I just really enjoyed this a lot. I think it's like a very important read. I think it's an enjoyable read, and I also really want to pick up her other volumes as well in the future. So I gave this book 5 stars. The last book that I finished reading this month was actually an audiobook, and it was Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. That is a novel in which abducted women, or women who are abducted by bad aliens, are temporarily dropped off on this ice planet, And one of them, Georgie, goes to see if there's any, like, supplies or help nearby, and is rescued by this huge blue alien named Vectel, who basically claims that she's like his mate. He's resonated for her, and she's now his stuff. You guys, I hate how much I enjoyed this. Like, I legitimately am kind of mad about how much I actually enjoyed the book. There were a couple of points where it felt more like a hate read, which at sometimes is an enjoyable experience. And there's other times where it's just like, I can't fully hate the book because it's just the sheer ridiculousness of this novel is insane. I don't even know, just it's ridiculous, you guys. The characters themselves, the audiobook I listened to, first of all, the voice actors involved were great. I do have to say though, I think in the future I might have to just check out physical copies of the other books in the series from the library instead of listening to audiobooks of them, just because I don't think I can handle hearing other human beings say certain words, just saying them out loud. Like, there's enough of me that is an eternal 12-year-old that I don't think I can handle certain words being said out loud into my eardrums. I wasn't a fan of the alpha male crap. It's not really my thing. It kind of was my thing at one time. It really is not anymore. So that was an aspect of it I was really not into. But I do have to admit that Vectel did have some growth over the course of the novel that I did appreciate, and it's so weird. I almost want to like pick Ruby Dixon's brain and be like, girl, where were you at when you came up with this idea? I actually don't know when these books were written, because it kind of feels like she watched Avatar, not the Airbender, but like the big blue alien one, and just created her own version of them, but was like, let me make the males into basically a giant walking, talking dildo. Because that's pretty much what they are. It was interesting. Yeah. Something else that I really did not like, actually, something that I really almost had me not finishing the novel, was the non-consensual stuff. There's one non-consensual scene that happens that it was kind of iffy, but it wasn't ultimately like a bad thing. But there is rape in the beginning of the book, not involving the Ice Planet people, involving the abducting aliens. And I just really felt like that whole scene and everything was highly unnecessary to the book at large. They could have just implied things. I feel like we did not have to get the details of that at all. Especially in what is basically a romance novel. I felt like that was very unnecessary to the plot at large, and like I said, I almost DNF'd it immediately when that was happening, but I made myself push through and continue the book, really hoping, because I will say, I might check out some of the other novels in the future. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, unless I get one of my friends to like buddy read stuff with me, but like I will probably look at some of the other books in the series at some point, but I'm really hoping that that scene is not repeated, or we don't get like flashbacks of it or something, because Again, I don't think that that was necessary at all to this story. I kind of, man, I hate I liked it. I really hate that. I did still give it like 4 stars. So that was everything that I read. Now we can talk a little bit about the books that I DNF'd this month. So one of the books I DNF'd this month sadly was for middle grade March, and that book was A Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. I picked this book for the prompt of reading a book about a neurodivergent character. I think I'm still going to count that I completed the challenge because technically Joey Pigza Swallow the Key would also count for that prompt, I believe. So yeah. So Mango-Shaped Space is about Mia, who is like 13 years old, and it has a secret. She, like, sound has different colors, and she ends up being diagnosed with synesthesia, and so it's just basically about her coming to terms with having synesthesia. I DNF'd this book for 2 reasons, one of which was that it is not representative of people who have synesthesia in real life. I was wondering about how things were when I got to this one scene in which Mia collects clocks and they all went off at high volume all at once, and she was completely and utterly overwhelmed by the amount of colors that just flooded her brain and her sight and stuff like that. And that sounded... I said this before that I don't really know that much about synesthesia, but from what I have researched a little bit about it, that did not seem to really coincide with what I knew of it. So basically I went to look at reviews of the book and to see if there were any reviews by people who have synesthesia, and the general consensus that I took away from the reviews of folks with synesthesia was that this book was highly inaccurate, and in some cases was kind of offensive to them because it is, it's unlike anything they experience, and they seem to be communicating this feeling that the author basically barely knew anything about synesthesia, and maybe they hadn't talked to anyone who actually has this. They just went off what they'd read somewhere and built upon that rather than actually talking with people. So that was a large part of when I was like, well, I don't know if I want to continue with this book, because I would rather read a book that is more accurate and is more representative of what it's actually like. Yeah, so that was like one point of not wanting to finish this. The other point is that there's some cat stuff. I probably should have figured there would be cat stuff because there's a cat on the cover. The cat's name is Mango. Some stuff. So the other part of me DNFing it is because I'm a giant big baby that didn't want to read about someone losing their cat. So, yeah. And I'm sorry if that is a spoiler, but my husband laughed at me a little bit, just a little bit, and told me, you know, isn't it foreshadowing enough with the cat and the title on the cover that maybe this ain't gonna be so great for pets. I also DNF'd 2 other books this month, and they were both romance novels by Lauren Asher. The first of those was Throttled, which is an F1 romance. My husband is a fan of F1, and I have watched a couple of the races and also find it kind of interesting, and I think Lewis Hamilton's like really cute. So when I'd heard like earlier, some point last year, that Throttled was a first book in like a F1 romance series, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try, because why not? So I don't want to sound like a total pretentious dick saying this, but like, holy shit, was that juvenile writing? I mean, you guys, I have read better fan fiction. I have read better Wattpad novels. Like, I don't know, and I don't mean to sound like a giant jerk, but like, it was just not that great. Like, I got through like the prologue thing, and I only got partway through like the first official chapter before I was like, this is not worth my time. But then I decided, okay, well, the 2-book rule, I have to give another one another chance before I write off this author. So I decided to read The Fine Print, because that is like siblings, like rich billionaire siblings, and like billionaires with a heart of gold thing is not really a trope that I'm like huge into, but I have read several of them, and I didn't think it, I figured that I might enjoy that one just because it has like a Disney World kind of element to it. It's involving like some brothers who have to complete certain tasks, or else they lose like their shares within the Disney World-esque theme park thing that their grandfather had created. And I figured that's promising. I love Disney. I like the idea of like romance novel surrounding like a theme park thing. That sounds pretty cool. I haven't read that before. So yeah, no. Writing was better. The writing had definitely improved from the other series. But at that one, I just hated the freaking characters. They were ridiculous. You have a total, like, shitheel guy and an incredibly immature girl. And there were a couple of just utterly unbelievable interactions that they had, and I just could not fathom how these interactions were allowed to happen in the situations in which they were placed. Like, it made absolutely no sense to me. Like, these would not happen in a professional setting. It was just completely and utterly unbelievable. And yeah, that just added on to the fact that both of these characters were insufferable in different ways. I just decided that I'm not in for the long haul with this. So yeah, I DNF'd that within the first couple of chapters as well. So I guess that's me officially writing off Lauren Asher as an author that I am checking out. So yeah, that was everything that I read or did not read in March. It was a pretty full reading month overall. Had a lot of a really good time reviserating. Jesus, I'm struggle busting today, guys. I had a really good time revisiting some old favorites. Had a really good time checking out some new books. Had a couple of stinkers, but overall, not too shabby for March. As always, please let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know how your reading month went. If I talk disparagingly about any books that you really like, sorry, it's nothing against you. I just didn't, they weren't for me. But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you so much for always watching. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so, and I will see you in the next video.